The moment you realize that your entire life can change begins with a simple yet powerful step of putting yourself first. This decision, although sometimes difficult, can become the turning point that radically transforms your reality. But what does it mean to put yourself first? It is not selfishness nor neglecting care for others. It is acknowledging your value, your need for love, care, and inner healing. And even though many believe that self-care is secondary, it is actually the foundation for genuine emotional and mental harmony. When you start giving attention to yourself, when you prioritize your needs, emotional energy begins to flow freely, without barriers. Healing becomes a natural process, and you stop feeling resistance on your path. Emotions that were previously suppressed are released. You become more open to new possibilities. Your relationships become sincere, and life is filled with meaning. This is not magic. It is an internal process that you can initiate yourself. Today, we will discuss how this path to healing begins with choosing yourself and how ultimately this decision changes your life. Many of us face countless expectations and obligations throughout our lives. We live in a world where caring for others, helping people, and providing support are primary principles instilled in us from childhood. In this context, the question often arises, when was the last time I put myself first? How often do we forget that to be useful to others, we first need to take care of our emotional, physical, and mental well-being? We learn to live for others, forgetting our own needs and desires. It happens that we often place our emotions, lives, and dreams on the back burner. We try to please those around us by being good daughters, sons, partners, friends, and colleagues. Unaware, ignoring our own needs, we begin to lose ourselves. We start feeling an inner emptiness, fatigue, apathy, and even disappointment in our own lives. It seems like everyone around us is functioning, but inside something is happening that we cannot explain. It is not just dissatisfaction. It is a deep sense of loss, as if something important has been lost. But what exactly? In fact, this feeling arises when we do not put ourselves first, when we do not consider our own desires and needs. With each passing day, we become increasingly distant from our inner truth, trying to meet other people's expectations. This is the beginning of emotional burnout, when we ignore our desires for so long that at some point we just cannot find the strength to move on. Many believe that taking care of oneself is selfish. We fear that if we start paying attention to our own needs, we will become narcissistic or even cold people. However, true self-care is not selfishness at all. It is an act of love and respect for oneself. It is the awareness that to be happy and healthy, we must first take care of ourselves. We must be honest with ourselves and recognize that we have the right to rest, to happiness, to love and support. When we learn to put ourselves first, it does not mean we become less caring or attentive to others. On the contrary, it means we begin to care for ourselves with the same attentiveness and respect with which we care for those we love. This allows us to restore our strength and give more to the world. Only when we pay attention to our needs and emotions can we truly help others. Putting yourself first is about learning to listen to yourself, your feelings, and your desires. It is the opportunity to understand what you need to be in harmony with yourself, what helps you feel happy and healthy. For example, it could be the simple decision to say no when you feel overwhelmed, or alternatively, decide to do something that brings you joy and satisfaction. It can be rest, time for yourself, activities that inspire you, or even just acknowledging that you deserve love and care. We often think that if we start taking care of ourselves, it will take away time we could spend on others. But in reality, once we prioritize self-care, it brings not only joy and satisfaction to ourselves, but also to those around us. We become more attentive and supportive because we find internal harmony and balance. Altruism and caring for others are important qualities, but they should not come at the expense of our inner well-being. If we constantly prioritize the needs of others over our own, we risk losing ourselves. We lose our inner strength, our individuality, our uniqueness. And it is in this moment that we start feeling that something is wrong, that our life has lost meaning. However, when we begin to prioritize self-care, when we realize that our inner world is just as important as the external, we regain inspiration. This does not mean we become selfish. It means we have finally recognized our value and right to happiness. And from this moment begins true healing, both physical and emotional. We start to see how changes occur in our lives. Relationships become more sincere, and our inner world is filled with calm and joy. The path to emotional healing begins with giving yourself the right to be yourself, allowing yourself to be alive, joyful, and healthy. When we put ourselves first, we stop being hostages to others' expectations and start living for ourselves. This not only opens the door to internal harmony, but also enables us to create deeper and more genuine relationships with those around us. When we start taking care of ourselves, we encounter an important stage, accepting our true nature. This means we stop suppressing our desires, our feelings, and perhaps even our weaknesses. At first, this may seem difficult because we are used to playing roles expected of us by others. We are accustomed to following the expectations of society, family, friends, colleagues, and even partners, without always questioning what we truly need. But once we start understanding that it is important not only to please others, but also to respect our own needs, a path to true healing opens before us. Accepting oneself involves acknowledging one's feelings, no matter how complex or inconvenient they may be. We often try to suppress emotions that seem negative or undesirable to us, like anger, fear, or sadness. However, suppressing these emotions leads to an accumulation of internal tension, ultimately blocking the natural flow of energy and preventing us from moving forward. True healing begins with allowing ourselves to experience these emotions and be honest with ourselves. This does not mean we should always be in a state of negativity, but it is important to understand that all emotions are part of our experience, and we have the full right to feel them. When we start accepting our vulnerabilities and weaknesses, we create space for growth. This can be a painful process, but it is precisely through accepting these aspects of ourselves that we become more complete. It frees us from the feelings of shame or guilt that often arise when we do not meet the ideals imposed by society. Self-acceptance helps us learn to love ourselves as we are, without needing to hide or change our true feelings and experiences. Moreover, it is important to recognize that self-care is not just about physical care, but also about working on our inner world. Internal changes take time, and it is important to approach ourselves with patience and respect. This process does not happen overnight, and it will not always be simple. But it is through this process that we become stronger and more confident in our abilities. When we begin to accept ourselves, we stop seeking approval and recognition from the outside. We are no longer dependent on the opinions of others, because our value is determined not by external factors, but by how we perceive ourselves from within. It is important to understand that self-care and self-acceptance do not mean avoiding difficult emotions or situations. Rather, It is an opportunity to learn to deal with these emotions in a healthy way, not blocking them, not suppressing them, but channeling them constructively. For example, when you feel anger or frustration, it is not a reason to hide your feelings. It is an opportunity to understand what exactly causes these emotions and how to cope with them constructively. When we begin to understand our emotions, we become more aware and ready for the internal changes that open the path to healing. Additionally, self-acceptance includes the ability to acknowledge our mistakes and shortcomings. This is a crucial step on the path to healing, because when we acknowledge our weaknesses and imperfections, we free ourselves from the burden of self-condemnation. Instead of blaming ourselves, we start to view our mistakes as lessons that help us become better. This is a key moment in the process of self-development, because by freeing ourselves from negative assessments, we begin to see the world from a clearer and calmer perspective. Self-acceptance and self-care also mean we stop comparing ourselves to others. When we put ourselves first, we begin to understand that our value does not depend on how we are perceived by others. We understand that each person is unique and that each of our paths is personal and unrepeatable. Therefore, by taking care of ourselves, we stop seeking approval from the outside and start listening to our inner voice. We stop evaluating ourselves by other people's standards and start adopting our own. When we accept ourselves as we are, we open up space for true freedom. This allows us to be sincere, honest, and open in our relationships with others. We begin to feel more confident in who we are, and our internal state becomes more harmonious. This does not mean we stop developing or striving for improvement. On the contrary, self-acceptance helps us grow with love and respect for ourselves. Once we learn to love and accept ourselves, our inner world begins to change. We become more peaceful, more confident, and happier. We stop seeking solutions to our problems outside ourselves and start looking inward. And it is in this process that true transformation begins, allowing us to live life to the fullest and be the best version of ourselves. When we begin to put ourselves first, new horizons open up before us. We stop being victims of our circumstances and start perceiving life as an active process in which we play an important role. But this path is not always easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to reconsider old beliefs and behavior patterns. One of the significant steps on the path to healing is the ability to say no and set boundaries that protect our personal value and inner world. And many of us are taught from childhood that saying no is not only impolite, but also selfish. We grow up with the idea that we must always please those around us, help everyone, and always be at our best. But when we try to please everyone, we forget about ourselves. We start to become overloaded with tasks, lose our identity, and suffer from stress and fatigue. It is at this point that we stop being ourselves and begin adjusting to others' expectations. Therefore, self-care is not only about rest and attention to our needs, but also about the ability to set boundaries that help us maintain our inner harmony. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love. It means we understand that we have the right to choose who we spend time with, which tasks we are ready to dedicate our energy to, and which relationships we maintain. Without these boundaries, we risk becoming victims of others' expectations and demands. And although it may seem selfish, it is in setting boundaries that our healing lies. We begin to understand that our time and energy are valuable and need to be protected every time we say no. Yes, we give ourselves the opportunity to preserve our mental and physical integrity. This also requires us to realize that not all people in our lives are meant to always be with us. Sometimes relationships can be toxic, draining our resources and making us unhappy. The ability to let go of such people is also part of the healing process. This doesn't mean we have to completely exclude everyone who was once important to us, but it does mean we should stop allowing others to dictate how we should live. We have the right to surround ourselves with those who support us and bring positivity into our lives. It's not about becoming isolated, but rather about understanding that self-care includes choosing people who bring peace and joy to our internal world. Establishing healthy boundaries also involves finding a balance between personal life and work. We often sacrifice our time for work or other obligations, forgetting that our personal life, rest, and recovery are just as important as professional achievements. Learning to separate personal time from work is an important step toward internal healing. We cannot be effective if we constantly exhaust our strength, trying to please everyone and do everything perfectly. Sometimes it is worth simply stopping, taking a breath, and saying to ourselves, "I deserve peace and rest." This gives us the opportunity to restore our energy and return to life with renewed strength and vitality. When we start setting boundaries, we also learn to approach our emotions and desires more consciously. We are no longer afraid to express what we feel and openly talk about our needs. We stop hiding our desires out of fear of being misunderstood or judged. Instead, we begin to appreciate our uniqueness and right to our own opinions. This frees us from the guilt we often feel when we decide to put ourselves first. We start to understand that our feelings and experiences are important, and we have the right to express them. Self-care and setting boundaries help us understand that it is important to listen to ourselves and our needs. This is not just about external actions like physical rest or temporary distancing from others, but also about internal awareness that we deserve respect and love. The ability to say no and set boundaries is an important step in building healthy and harmonious relationships with ourselves and others. It also means we begin to approach our lives more responsibly, respecting both our needs and those of others. This process helps us become more confident in ourselves and our abilities. We stop being dependent on the opinions of others, and instead begin to rely on our own feelings and intuition. This restores a sense of inner strength and wholeness. We understand that we can control our lives by setting boundaries that support our emotional and mental harmony. This is a path to healing that begins with love and respect for oneself. The path to self-acceptance and emotional healing is often accompanied by internal struggle and doubt. We start noticing that our old lifestyle and mindset are beginning to fall apart. But it is in this process that we encounter the most important and profound changes. This is the moment when we reevaluate our priorities, re-examine our goals, and start choosing ourselves. It may be painful, but there lies immense power, the power to break free from old limitations and patterns. We begin to understand that our life is not just about fulfilling obligations, but also about deep self-expression and internal growth. When we decide to put ourselves first, we face the need to redefine what is important to us. We can no longer be the people who live by others' rules and follow imposed standards. This is a process of liberation from the fear of being different from others, from the fear of losing recognition or not pleasing those around us. This path requires courage because we start refusing what does not align with our true selves. We refuse to live in a world where others impose their expectations on us and begin to create our own reality. The process of restructuring our thinking and values often encounters resistance, both from the external world and within ourselves. We start to doubt the correctness of our decisions, worry about not being understood or judged. But it is precisely at this point that true healing begins. It is the moment we start accepting our vulnerability and learn to be honest with ourselves. We understand that we cannot be strong if we continue to hide our weaknesses. On the contrary, it is through acknowledging our weaknesses and imperfections that we gain the power to change. When we begin living according to ourselves, a whole new world of possibilities opens before us. We stop wasting our energy maintaining facades and roles expected by others. We start building our lives based on our desires, not on what the external reality dictates. This is very liberating. We no longer need to justify ourselves to others or try to be someone we're not. We become honest with ourselves and with the world, and this gives us confidence. Another important step on the path to healing is forgiving ourselves. We often carry the weight of regret, grievances, and past mistakes. We cannot move forward until we learn to let go of these burdens. Forgiving ourselves is a process that begins with accepting that we are imperfect. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we relate to it. Forgiving ourselves frees us from feelings of guilt and shame, which often hinder us from moving forward. When we forgive ourselves, we create space for new opportunities and growth. Forgiving ourselves also includes accepting our mistakes as part of the learning and growth process. This is a crucial moment in our healing because we start viewing our failures not as defeats, but as lessons that have helped us become more mature and wise. This allows us to let go of the fear of failure and begin moving forward with confidence. We understand that our value does not depend on our mistakes or shortcomings, but on how we relate to ourselves and the process of change. When we begin to forgive ourselves and let go of past grievances, we free ourselves for the present and the future. This allows us to be more open and receptive to the new opportunities life offers us. We understand that every day is a chance to become better and that we can start anew despite any mistakes we have made before. Forgiving ourselves is a path to true healing, which allows us to move forward with ease and confidence. An important aspect of this path is recognizing that it is not always necessary to be in perfect form to be worthy of love and respect. We do not need to constantly achieve perfection to feel valuable. On the contrary, self-acceptance and love include the acknowledgement that we are worthy of love and respect, despite our flaws and imperfections. When we stop striving for the ideal, we begin to accept ourselves as we are, and this helps us to be happier and more satisfied in our lives. The path to self-acceptance is a process that requires time, patience, and honesty with oneself. But it is in this process that we find our true strength and ability to change. When we put ourselves first, we begin to see the world differently. We become aware that we have the right to be happy, that we deserve love and respect. This profound awareness liberates us and opens the way to real healing. The path to healing and self-acceptance is not an easy but incredibly important process. When we start putting ourselves first, we open up infinite opportunities for growth and transformation. It's not just about physical rest or care, but about a deep internal process of accepting our strengths and weaknesses, our needs and boundaries. We begin to understand that true strength lies not in pleasing everyone, but in being true to ourselves and living in alignment with our true values.